This is the Horse-Human Connection, a captivating podcast where we extend into the world of equine assisted learning, horse training, and gentleness in working with these magnificent creatures. Captivating stories from the leading professionals and ordinary people alike unravel novel ideas in being with horses. The Horse-Human Connection is an idea, a place, and a voice. The idea is to support the quiet revolution and recognize the intelligence and true nature of the horse. The place is a destination farm near the Umpqua Forest and River that slows down visitors and patrons enough to experience the shift. The voice is this podcast. Welcome to today's episode.
Hi, this is Ishi Abel with the Horse-Human Connection Matrix. Today I have Asha with me again, and we had such a nice chat last time, and I enjoyed interviewing her so much. I wanted to have her back so we could talk about more stuff. Thanks so much for joining me again, Asha.
Oh, thank you for having me again, Ishi. I'm excited to be here, and I have no idea where this conversation is going, and I'm excited about that.
Yeah,
So we'll
yeah,
see where
me
that
too.
goes.
So I was sharing with Asha a little bit before I hit the record button that I was contacted by a dancer who is autistic, whose choreographer is working with horses and Liberty work in dance horse. And I am so excited to interview them soon. But today, Asha and I had wanted to talk about dance because we have that in common, and I wanted to ask her some questions about it. So it's always interesting how things just circle in and all the dots end up getting connected. There really are no coincidences. So, Asha, tell me about your dance in New York. What kind of dance did you do? How old were you when you got there? What was it like?
Well, I was 18 when I moved to New York City, to Manhattan. I went to New York University, so that was what drew me to New York City. I grew up dancing, so I was on the stage by the age of 5, literally doing little tap recitals. But then at the age of 6, I was in a musical called Carousel, and along with all my dance that I did, both ballet and modern, I loved the theater as well. And I did all the musicals that came through my little town of Fort Wayne, Indiana. We were very lucky because we had a brilliant director, theater director, he had an amazing way of bringing out the best in really amateur folk. And we also had a very gifted choreographer, and they were very good friends. And she knew how to make people that didn't know how to dance look like they could dance. And, looking back, it was such an amazing education. I would be in the wings just watching every performance and, all the scenes that I wasn't in. I just soaked it all up. So I think it was instilled in me to have a high level of dedication for whatever my endeavors were.
Mhm.
And I saw an amazing amount of professionalism for, that caliber of theater. It was quite amazing looking back. I just feel so lucky. And we had a good dance studio as well. We did a lot of performing in ballet. We put on the Nutcracker every year. We did spring and fall performances. We had guest teachers come in. So
Wow.
again, I was just really granted so much in the way of just education in the arts and what it meant to be dedicated in what you love to do and to really follow your passion, and just the hours that we would put in. It wasn't a recital. It was a performance, inviting us to be as professional as we possibly could be at the age of 13 or 15 or however old we were. It was amazing. And so when I was 16, I went off to a performing arts high school in Houston. And then I switched to another performing arts high school outside of Boston for my senior year of high school. And so again, I just got to immerse myself in dance. And that's when I really got more into the modern dance. And then I went off to New York University when I was 18, and we did ballet and modern both. And I chose Tisch School of the Arts. It's a sector of NYU because we were invited to do lots of our own choreography right away.
Mhm.
There's other schools that would not let us really explore our own choreographic talents until like the second or third year. And NYU was like, yeah, go for it right away. And so we got to, just pull our classmates into whatever choreographic interest we had, and we got to be in each other's works. And that was just amazing, right?
That's a very different world than the choreography is very different than being a dancer. I
Mhm.
mean, they're really very different creative expressions. And just because you know the vocabulary of dance doesn't mean that you have an eye for how it all comes together on stage. And yeah, interesting. Wow. So you had, what was the level of dedication before you went to the performing arts high school? Like, were you 4 times a week, 5 times a week?
Pretty much every day because we had rehearsals all the time. So we were always rehearsing for the next performance. So as soon as the Nutcracker was over at the end of the holiday season, in January, we're getting ready for the spring concert. So I just remember being there all the time. I'd get off at school and I'd have an early dinner, and then I'd be at my ballet class at 4:30 in the evening. There'd be one or two classes or a class and a rehearsal. And I remember being there till 9 o'clock,
Wow,
and then
every day.
and then
Wow.
going home and then and then doing my homework. So that's how it went. And then on the weekends we were at the studio at least one of those 2 days, if not both, again for I
Good.
guess Friday nights were the night I didn't have I didn't have, I wasn't at the dance studio unless we were, on the stage that weekend. Um,
Wow. So that was your life, school and dance. That's it. Wow.
Friday nights I was a teenager, I went to the mall. That was like that was like the one night I was kind of, the normal kid, right? So
Right. So when we talked before and you said that moving to New York gave you a different perspective with dancers, and it sounded like the dancers that you were around were much more liberal than what you were used to. Maybe liberal is the wrong word, that were more open to more esoteric things and
well, it was me moving from Fort Wayne, Indiana to New York City. Granted, I was outside of Boston that senior year of high school. That was really nice because I think that's where I started to really explore, spirituality and more alternative viewpoints, you could say. It was, a liberal school there. And we were all artists, so we had a lot of existential conversations then. So I think that's where it really started.
that shaped part of who you are today. As well as the dance, because being a physical therapist, I mean, in dance, you use every muscle. You learn about all these things that can contract that are, I mean, are so different than if you're just on a hike or doing, playing soccer or whatever.
I think that's one of the things that dance gave me was, exploring my own vessel and trusting what my body is showing me, or, like learning to listen to it in a very intimate way. And I'm going to say not all dancers do that. They're not always trained that way. If they're trained to be technicians or just depending on who their teachers are. I
Mhm.
think even beyond the dance world, I got into things like Alexander technique and Feldenkrais technique, and I remember just like, rolling on the floor and breathing with people. And I think I mentioned that in our last conversation, when I was still in Fort Wayne, Indiana, I would go to what was called the Fort Wayne Dance Collective in downtown Fort Wayne. And I would be like the 16-year-old there in my unitard, and I'd roll around on the floor with all these 30, 40, and 15-year-old women, that were really exploring a whole nother way of being. Like, I just remember one woman like made this whole dance piece up about this, I can't hardly remember, but this person that lived inside of her right leg. And there was this dialogue between her and the right leg. And it was just, so off the wall. But like, I was just like, wow, this is so fascinating. And I just ate it up. Or getting into body mind centering and being able to like, explore what does it feel like to move from my blood versus my bones versus my lymph system versus my muscles, like, and how it possessed such different qualities. Like that's the kind of stuff that I was really into when I was 16 and 17, 18 years old. And I brought that into even my more traditional training at NYU, the
Mhm.
ballet, the modern.
Mhm. Yeah, I can see how all of that would integrate. I had some similar experiences. I was never such a good dancer, but dance was in my life, and some of those things were in my life. And we had something called continuum, which was like these micro movements and exploration of very small movements and going with a movement that would look like, I remember this woman demonstrating it, and she was making these sounds, and she was in this fetal position, and she was moving around, and she became a fetus, like, and that was just, it wasn't like she was trying to become a fetus, or there was an idea of it, but as she began to move and explore, that's where it took her. And so I can remember then her giving us assignments to practice, and it's something akin to what you're talking about with the bone and the blood. And it took me into a different place, a similar place that horses will take me. That zone of, you're in the world, but you're like in some kind of a meditative state. Like, I'm sure the brain waves are different.
Mhm.
Yeah. So you had all of those things, and you're in New York, and then how long did you stay in New York? How long did you dance? And then when did horses arrive in your life? And was there like a connection there?
I was in New York City for, I guess, about 8 years.
Hmm.
So after I finished my time at New York University, I did the Laban Institute, um, Laban Bartenief Institute for Movement Studies. I did that certification program that was in New York City. Again, just another way to explore, movement in the body. And then I did some, professional dance on the side and got into personal training and got into teaching yoga. Like I was that's how I made my living in New York City. And then I hiked the Appalachian Trail from Georgia to Maine.
Wow.
Yeah, and then was in Florida briefly, and then I settled in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and decided to go back to school and got my doctorate in physical therapy. Um, so yeah, and then I just started playing with bringing it all together. So I delved much more into yoga. I became a yoga educator. So I've spent many years teaching teachers how to be teachers, I guess, doing, getting hired in to do a lot of the anatomy and physiology for teacher training programs. But what's always thrilled me is just bringing it all together. I've never been one who likes to sit in one camp
Mhm.
with anything, actually. It's like, in the yoga world, it's like Ashtanga and Iyengar, like, opposite ends of the political spectrum, basically, in the yoga world. And I'm like, let's bring them together, and so like that's what I've done. Like I just meshed the two in how I've taught. It's like, or Ashtanga and Yin yoga, they're very opposite.
Mhm.
But it's like there's benefits to both. They balance each other beautifully. Let's do both. So that's, and then if I bring in all the other like interesting stuff, all the mind body, modalities and the Alexander and the Feldenkrais and the body mind centering and, all the more, the contact improvisation, you could bring in the continuum, like all that stuff and just blend it all together depending on like what group I have in front of me,
Mhm.
or what person I have in front of me, and just, you know, learning how to follow the lead of the group in order to lead, if that makes sense.
Yes,
Kind
it
of like
does.
what we do with horses, it's like, you know, you know, we're the human, so we say that we're the one leading, but I think we lead best when we know how to follow the horse too. Like,
Mhm,
every single time we offer something, what are they offering back? You know, and that's how you start to dance together. You
mhm.
know, you know, I've always felt like to be a really good leader, you have to know how to follow. It's like if you have a group of people that you're teaching, that you're wanting to share yoga with that day, it's like you've got to meet them where they're at. You've got to kind of feel the energy of the group and you teach from that space.
Mhm.
Like, to me, that's what lights me up. It's just, I come in the room and I'm like, what's going to happen today? Like, I might have an agenda, but after a while, I just dropped the agenda because, it's like the people that are going to show me what needs to be shared today.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah, I've definitely had that experience too. Wow. So then when did you start writing?
When did I start writing? Six, something like that, 2007. It was really interesting. Like, I actually was invited into the horse world through a lot of natural horsemanship.
Mhm.
So I learned a lot on the ground before I really did a lot in the saddle. And then I just fell in love because I loved the way horses communicate. And of course, we love the energy that they offer, that space that they invite us to come into if we're ready and if we're willing to listen and to kind of meet them in their energy field, which I think is higher than ours overall. And then I just kept doing more and more, and then eventually my horse showed up, and we went on a whole other journey together.
Do you still dance? When was the last time you danced?
Oh, 2004, 5, 6, something like that. It's kind of like my passions changed, you
Mhm.
know. You dance didn't light me up the same way anymore, and then I discovered horses. Yeah. And anyone who, is in the horse world knows utterly how consuming it is in all ways, shapes, and forms.
They are very compelling. They are very compelling. So you went from teaching yoga and teaching people how to teach yoga and being immersed in all of that to writing. I mean, you have a profession as a physical therapist as well, but the writing now, when you started, you mentioned that you did hunter jumper, but when you first started writing, were you like headed that way, or was it just like recreational?
It was all just recreational, and I just did a lot of play and liberty work. That's just what I was exposed to. It happened to be um, what the teacher that I ended up with did a lot of. And so that's what I did first. And then start to build my confidence in the saddle. And then I ended up basically just looking for a place closer to home where I could ride instead of, I was traveling quite a bit, just because of who I connected up with. And I was looking for something close. And a couple of people recommended this one barn. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's 10 minutes from my house. And it ended up being a hunter jumper barn, but that's not why I went. It was just, a couple people recommended the quality of instruction there, and it was close to my house. And I remember I walked in, and, the walked in for my lesson, and the woman there said, "Do you jump?" And I'm like, why is she asking me that? And I had jumped one time at a friend's place in Georgia. I had done this workshop of combining kind of yoga and horses together. Uh,
Mhm.
just a lot of just mind body kind of exploratory work for people that weren't real comfortable with horses. And I led that retreat at my friend's house using, her horses. But during one of the breaks, we hopped on, and they let me jump over these little cross rails. And I just thought it was the most fun thing ever. So that was my first experience with jumping. Was I was on a gaited horse. I just had to sit there and point, and he flew over. It was a lot of fun. So when I ended up at this place close to my house, I quickly learned, like, oh, she asked if I knew how to jump because it's a hunter jumper barn. Oh,
Right, right.
anyway, so she put me on the good old Dan, who the joke is he's taught everyone in our county how to ride. And he's still around, actually. He's still packing little kids. He doesn't do the big,
Wow.
but he's still doing it. Anyway, so I had my first jumping lesson that day, and and I was hooked. I
Yeah.
was just like, this is amazing. I think what I love most about it is not so much the jumping, but like everything that you do in between the jumps to set yourself up for a successful jump.
Mhm.
That's what I love. Just there's different perspectives on the hunter jumper world, and sometimes it gets a bad rap, and I know why. But for me, it was always about, like, with my horse, it was like, what do you want to do together? And he liked to jump. He actually liked to show. He would light up. I could
Right.
feel his body lift underneath me when I'd walk into the show ring. Like, he was all about it.
Mhm.
And that was the main reason I showed, was because he was good
Because
at it.
James wanted to and was good
One,
at it.
he
Yeah.
was good at it. You
Yeah.
know, he was a pretty steady mount for a thoroughbred,
So
so.
can I back up and ask you to define a few things? What do you call natural horsemanship? And can you talk a little bit about liberty work as well and what that looked like when you were doing it?
Well, I really can't define a natural horsemanship because it was only what I was introduced to way back when,
Mhm.
before I knew anything really about horses.
Mhm.
So I don't think that I'm really one to express, like, I have my ideas around it.
Mhm.
But I also think that there's a lot of things that are considered natural horsemanship that I probably wouldn't agree with. There's a lot of beautiful things that people do with horses that doesn't get to be put in that camp. So, I think it's a loose term that's gets used a lot. But my experience was, just all the groundwork we did, and really connecting to the horse and learning to read the horse's body language, and, really learning what are they thinking and feeling, and, giving them time and space to, like, process something before they do something at liberty, or before they are invited to work with an obstacle. And we
Mhm.
had, like, a whole obstacle course out there. So, that's what I remember, is just, like, I've always really respected them as sentient beings that can choose to partner with us, and I've always loved that piece.
Mhm.
Like, I wasn't just thrown on a horse and learn how you know, to ride. I had that whole other piece first, which I think was, looking back, was, a nice gift. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't seek it out. It's just what fell into my lap.
That's wonderful. That's really beautiful. So the liberty work, it sounds like some of what you were doing was without halters or lead ropes,
Mhm.
taking horses through obstacles at different paces. Is that?
Yep. So learning how to regulate my own energy,
Mm-hmm.
create a shift in the horse, right? So you lift your energy up, you're going to get a horse that's more alive, right? Or if you calm your energy down, you get, like, just playing with that energy. And for me, it was like it was a whole new world, right? The horse world is, like no other, right? But I had so much training with dance and being in my body that in some ways it was a very easy transition. Like, I picked things up really quickly. Like, I understood, oh, influencing my body influences the horse. Like, it's like, oh, I get that.
Mm-hmm.
Or even, under saddle, I understood things that my body wasn't quite capable of doing yet because I wasn't skilled as a rider yet. But it's like, oh, I understand, like shifting, your sitting bones is going to have an influence on the horse. I get that. Those subtleties that a green rider can't necessarily do. It's like it was frustrating because mentally and emotionally, I got it. Like
Right.
even even in my body, I got it. I just
The
didn't.
proprioception and the isolations that are required for aids were already a language that you spoke. It was just honing the skills for being on a horse because you already had all the athleticism and all the neural pathways and the knowledge from your brain to your body.
Yeah, that's a really, you said it better than I did. Yes, that's exactly what I was trying to share. Yeah. Um,
So
and
there is this really like I'm able to verbalize it because I experience it too. I was never been the level of dancer that you are or the level of rider that you are, but because I've done both, I understand the jump, the how all those things build, those skill sets build to when you're on the horse and the relationship thing and the being in your body. It makes perfect sense.
I think the most challenging piece, I think, with being under saddle for me, what was learning how to feel my own body and feel this other body underneath me. Like that was new. Like, I mean, I didn't do a lot of like, partner work in dance. And so just feeling this, 1,000-pound animal underneath me and having to interpret all that at the same time, feeling my own body and
Mhm.
learning how to bring the two together, like that was a whole new experience. I think,
And
I
it's
mean,
it's magical when it does come together. I've only had a few moments like that, but and I had a trainer who helped me a lot by saying, find your collective center. And when there was that and lightness in the rain, and I could feel the horse like come up and join me, and that we were together, like only for a few moments, but it's such a beautiful, beautiful thing.
it's amazing how much work and effort we put into the horse world to have those few moments.
Right.
I've had lots of amazing moments with my horse. We have a partnership, right? You've been riding the same horse for, over a decade. You're bound to have some special moments, but actually the ride that stands out the most was actually on my friend's thoroughbred mare, not my own horse.
Tell me more. I want to hear all about it.
Like I rode her a lot for a while,
Mhm.
and I was just there one early summer morning, and the barn was really quiet. There was, maybe a couple workers around, but it was quiet. And I just tacked her up and got ready like I usually did, and we went into the ring. And you know, she she was she was trained by a really good rider, but she had the most amazing rhythm. Like she was the most rhythmical horse I've ever ridden. And I just went into a trance. It was the most meditative experience on a horse I've ever had. Like, you know, a lot of the rides were beautiful with her, but there was just that one morning we were just in sync.
Yeah.
Like, I just could hear the footfall, on the canter, and I could hear her breathing, and I could feel my body, and it was just everything was just in sync. We were just flowing. And I knew she felt it too, because she just felt so relaxed and happy, and it felt like she wanted to go forever.
Mm.
Ears are forward, and she was just it was just magical.
Yeah.
It was just amazing. Sweet
Yeah,
little
those are sweet,
uh,
sweet memories. Very sweet memories. And horses do connect so much through rhythm. Um, yeah, which is another natural transition from dance, right? Because when you have a group of people in rhythm, dancing in rhythm, the horses understand that as well.
yeah.
It flows both ways. Yeah.
She was funny, like, she's a thoroughbred mare, so she had her opinions. And it's like I was always like, well, let's walk and then we'll trot and then we'll canter. And her mom didn't really trot that much. And so I was trotting her along and then she just broke into a canter on her own. She goes, well, my mom and I do it this way. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to argue with that. She had a lovely canter.
Mhm. And not and to go along with that, like not to have an agenda, not to be in charge, but to be, not to get all like, oh, this horse shouldn't do that unless I give it that, that command to go into a canter, but to be with the animal, not in opposition of it.
Right. I'm like, well, I had no agenda, I'm just gifted the ability to ride this beautiful horse for my friend. And, she was 15, 16 at the time. She just retired from jumping. Like, why not let her lead? Like, she's not going anywhere. She just wanted to
Right.
move into a nice little canter, you know,
Right.
and she was showing me, like, I felt like she was showing me what she does best.
Uh-huh.
It's like, why trot? We can canter. I have a lovely canter, you know. Okay, sweetheart. And
Well,
that's what I mean. Like that's actually it's a little bit of an example of, you know, following in order to lead.
right.
Just because I allowed her to canter and I didn't like reprimand her for it or bring her back to the trot, I just let her do it. I was following her lead, but I was still leading. Like
Mhm.
I could have brought her back at any time. It's not like I lost, my connection with her at all.
Right.
Like,
That's exactly the kind of thing that I would love more people, to fully understand instead of having the dominance rule always in effect. And, that it's, you open up to so much beauty and connection when you can let go of those things.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that the horses are much more happy and willing to give back more when they have a voice more of the time.
Mhm.
It's like, if I can give my horse a voice, a lot of the time, then I feel like they're more likely to step up and take care of me in those moments when I might need a little support.
Because I know.
It goes both ways.
We talked before in the last interview about some of the energy work and how you came into that as well. Just trying to think kind of where to go next with some of my questions.
Well, I think I've always kind of, explored that energy piece.
Hmm.
I think I really started to delve into that when I delved into looking at spirituality when I was 16. I really started exploring at that time. But in my work as a physical therapist, I'd have like, amazing success with most individuals, but then there'd always be, the more challenging or interesting case where, normal physical therapy protocols or even my intuition using dance and movement and everything that I'd gathered in the movement world wasn't, necessarily like, quote, fixing the issue. Like I could definitely tame the chronic issue or give them exercises to kind of keep things at bay. But I'm like, there's another piece. And I knew there was another like deeper piece, like a psychosomatic piece. There's an emotional piece. There's like, our bodies hold story. Every single cell in our body, holds story. I believe not just from this lifetime, but other lifetimes. And so, you can do all the physical stuff you want, but if the individual is holding on to that story, either consciously or unconsciously, then it may not shift all the way. And
Hmm.
I think that's what really got me into really delving into the energy piece in even just the last decade. It's like, I want more answers. I want more information. I want more tools to help people shift a story.
More full healing.
Yeah, exactly. And that kind of just opened up the whole door with animals and animal communication as well. The same thing with them as well. Although animals are usually a little easier. They don't hold on to their story as much.
Hmm.
Horses, I think, are a little bit more like people because it's so layered. Uh,
Hmm.
like people, I think that sometimes the horses, it takes a little bit more time for them to process. Um, Dogs and cats seem a little simpler.
Yeah, I wonder with horses too, how much they pick up from their people. Like if it's still in our mind what their injury is it then in their mind too? As those connections are really deep.
And I've thought about that. It's actually such a great question. And I also wonder if it's because they're just enmeshed in our history as well. I mean, they went to war with us. I mean, I think that they maybe have more lifetimes with us and they carry more story around us, people,
Mhm.
and not always good ones.
Right.
Know that, as a healer, I have to help the horse unpack. Like I could be dealing with some sort of physical trauma in their body, and it's like, an Akashic record will pop in. They'll show me a scene from another lifetime. And that's when I started to realize, oh, they're more like people. They carry stuff more like people do, where I haven't really seen like other lifetimes with cats and dogs. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but I'm just saying I don't think they hold on the same way.
Doesn't seem to get stuck the same way.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm still exploring that, but that's been my experience so far.
Well, horses do have the largest limbic system other than humans of land mammals, so they certainly have plenty of emotion to get stored
That makes sense.
from a physiological standpoint. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And definitely have the intertwined history. That's a big one.
Mhm.
Yeah. What else? What's up with you today? What do you like? Not today as in like today, but I mean today, December 5th. What's what's present for you?
What's present for me?
Yeah.
Just that I love animals so much. I want to help them so much.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes I feel honestly that my heart is too big. And I don't mean that in an egotistical way at all.
Uh-huh.
It's more like, wow, it's hard to be on the planet sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do I help these beautiful creatures, these beautiful animals that haven't always had a voice, yeah, and that they can carry some of the same trauma that people carry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that with our pets and our domestic animals, that's so true, but my mind goes to wild horses, There are so many wild horses that, well, we really put them through it, with our laws and our rules and our competing pastures, grazing land for cattle and all the politics that go into it and what becomes of them. And I don't know that there are very many people that love horses that don't feel some pull to want to do something about the plight of wild horses and horses that end up at rescues and to make shifts for them since we create so much of this trauma for them.
Mhm. It's heart-wrenching. Remember my horse, I asked my horse about it once, and he said something like, it's all part of the great plan, but I'm sure glad I'm not one of those. Like, it's big. It's huge. And I haven't really connected with any of, the wild horses, but I have worked a lot with, other rescue animals. And
Mhm.
I've worked with horses in rescues, I've communicated with them, done some healing work on, like even just rescues from farms, you know,
Mhm.
turkeys and sheep and cows and it's really interesting. And it's when we get into working with animals that have such trauma, same with people, it's like really having to hold my own field. Otherwise you can just get swept away in their immense pain and trauma that they've suffered. And it's like when we think about holding space for someone,
Mhm.
it's like you have to, it's in order to really help someone, we have to, we can't go with them in their all their emotions, right? Like we can feel for them, but we have to kind of hold our center. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
And I find it a little more challenging with animals sometimes to do that,
Mhm.
because that they don't have a voice in the same way that sometimes people are able to have, you know
Or choices, the way people have.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, they're not responsible
But they're also the most gracious, they're always so grateful. Yeah,
of what can be done. Yeah.
like they're just so grateful. They're always just so happy. I show up for one of them energetically. They're just always so happy. You know, sometimes they don't know why I'm there and I have to explain it.
Uh-huh.
But most of the time they do. But there's just it's very rewarding work. Not always the easiest, but definitely rewarding.
Yeah. Yeah. Really good stuff.
How's Firefly doing?
She's
Your
been hurting a little bit. She's had her blanket on and she's looking like, here's another winner, but she's hanging in there. The horse that wants to be ridden the most is the one that's retired that can't anymore.
thought it was really interesting what you said about, like, I guess Firefly, would love to be ridden, but really can't anymore,
Hmm.
right? And I have felt the same way with James. Like I retired him and he knows why, and he knows it's not really safe for me to be on his back anymore. And, he misses it too. Like we think it's just us, but a horse that like that was so much of our partnership was under saddle. And he enjoyed it. He enjoyed the work, he enjoyed the connection, he enjoyed the outings. And it's like I don't think we always acknowledge that, the horses, they have to adjust to a life change too.
Oh yeah, I've watched her change over the years and go from being the absolute lead mare of many, many herds to being pushed around. And, I have to shut the gate to make sure she gets enough food. I have to feed her separately. But we had a little bit of time last summer where I felt strong enough to do, for me, they were sprints. For her, it was just barely a trot. But I would hold the lead rope and we would run back and forth. Well, she would trot and I would run from the barn to the house and get in that rhythm. And we were talking about horses connecting with rhythm. I could get those moments with her running next to her, and
People.
that's what I was satisfied with because that's what's available.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still play with that a little bit with James too. Like we'll hit the dirt road and we'll play with like walk trot transitions, because
Mhm.
to be connected. Like he
Mhm.
feels my energy shift and he responds, and it's so easy with him. But I get tired because he's long-legged thoroughbred, and like he's finding his nice little trot rhythm, and I'm like falling apart. He's like, "Oh, this is nice, mom." And I'm like, "Yeah."
Yeah. Yeah. And then I've got Charlie who's, has a few rides on him. And when we go horse hiking up the road across the street, he'll look at the ridge and want to go up there. What's up there? Let's go explore. And it's like the only way that's happening is if you can carry me. And then we're back in that loop of, well, what's going to happen to my leg when it seizes up? Because his muscle just contracts from an old injury, even though the vet has said, he's fine to be ridden. I know, and he knows he's not ready for that, or something has to happen first, or I don't know. No. Anyways, I will contact you for that session. And this is probably a good time to wrap up. Yeah.
Yeah, this was a wonderful conversation issue.
Yeah.
I totally get
Thank
it.
you for making time for me to chat with you and record it for all the people that listen to the podcast. Just, I love how these experiences all come together. How the different things we do in our lives all culminate to just make life that much richer. And then when we find other people that have similar experiences, the way it gets to be shared is I don't know, to me is just remarkable. And I'm so curious about these other people with the dance and the horses and the autism and what all that's going to be. So it's nice to lay some groundwork for that as well.
Well, I love the web of people that you're building here with this podcast. The community is just wonderful. I love it.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about it too. All right, Asha, I'll talk to you soon.
Okay,
Mhm. Bye.
lovely. Bye-bye.